Hello, Dr. Vidanage. Welcome to SNI. Glad to be having you speaking with SNI once again after, I think, a gap of some months. And let me begin by asking you about the victory of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Well, he was tipped to win, but what do you think are the reasons for his victory?
Well, yes, I should say, thanks again for having me, Parul. As you said, of course, he was, deemed to be the winner, but people didn't. There was this, ambivalence about whether he's going to get 50% plus or whether he's going to just be at the late, maybe 48, 49%. That was the only debate. So there was a clear consensus that he will be the winner. Well, there are several reasons, as I see. Number one, when it comes to the domestic political setup, I think that the 2015 change, there was a lot expected by Sri Lankan voters from the 2015 administration, the regime. They thought 2015 would turn, would be a radical departure, and the idea, the mantra of good governance will actually deliver. So the good governance mantra failed miserably short of delivering what the people expected. So I think number one, President Rajapaksa's victory comes back in the backdrop of significant failures of the good governance administration. When I say failures, failures to deliver, and not just failures of delivering, but also the outlook of the government. People felt they were living in a situation where there's always a constant political instability because of the sway between the president and the prime minister, because it is a grand coalition. So for me, as a political scientist, sometimes a grand coalition is a fundamental anomaly in democratic representation. It's good to fix a problem, but it's not great for to carry on making policy, taking a country forward. So there you see anomaly, and then it showed that anomaly showed its sign when it started falling apart. So anybody who represented the grand coalition didn't come on a solid footing to be the candidate. So I think Gotabaya Rajapaksa had that advantage. He was not from the grand coalition. He was not even from the opposition. He was a fresh candidate with a track record of a person who could deliver, who could get things done. The image of not totally anti-establishment. He didn't have. He was partly of the establishment of the Mahinda Rajapaksa administration, but he was not a politician. He was a bureaucrat who delivered. So he had a lot of pluses coming in at a time when people were very much disappointed with the mainstream politics. So he was an alternative candidate, not a total alternate. He was earlier from the administration, but he was clearly an alternate given the fact what was happening outside. So I think that gave him significant advantage, the image of his ability to deliver, and the consistent message he gave was also very interesting. He was not a brilliant orator. He was not the charming orator. He doesn't have the charm Mahinda Rajapaksa has, but he kind of banked in a certain mantra of meritocracy, development, a vision. I think people believed in his vision rather than his opponent's vision. So I think all of those things came together for his victory.
My next question to you is about the foreign policy approach of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Sri Lanka is a very strategically located country, and you've also had competing regional powers vying for Sri Lanka's attention. So, how do you see this, especially because India has been also very swift in its outreach to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa? He's just been to New Delhi. Oh, your comments on this?
Well, I think again there was this trepidation. Well, he's never being a politician. He has never been part of foreign policy formulation. So it's a total novice. So how can he respond to the pressures of a time where there is significant regional political turbulence and Sri Lanka has to quickly align calculate its alignment properly, to kind of not just to survive and to thrive. As I always say, it's always a matter of survival as well as a matter of thriving, not just surviving. So I think what he quickly did was he came out as, for me, his foreign policy, at least given the 2 weeks and the and build up to the election before that, I think he's banked on the idea of the doctrine of pragmatism, rather than trying to be articulate a very complicated foreign policy. He's, I think, banking on pragmatism, where he's clearly showing that he has a sense of how the region is changing, and he has a sense of how India has changed. This is a point I keep on making, because I always make the point, Indo-Sri Lanka relations, we can go back for centuries, we can go back for decades when it comes to modern states, but India is not the India most Sri Lankans think with India is. It is very different under Prime Minister Modi. So I think that reality Sri Lankan political leadership has to understand. So I think President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is clearly demonstrating the fact that he has understood that. He has
Oh,
understood what India under Modi looks like, what
yeah.
India under Modi wants, and how sensitive India under Modi is to the regional security dynamics and the strategic dynamics. So I think Gotabaya Rajapaksa is very pragmatic there. So that
So
is
do you
why
think that,
yes,
sorry
Parul.
for interrupting you, but do you think that has something to do with the fact that both President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Modi are seen as strongmen in their respective countries?
Yeah, I think it's not the primary; it's a secondary. I think it helps
Mhm.
them to understand, have a have estimate of each other. They're both a little similar, but what I'm trying to tell you is more than that. Not just the strongman issue, but the fact that he understands more. Prime Minister Modi has a deeper, wider aspiration of where India should be in the region as well as the world, and India is quite affluent, and as well as India is not the dormant India, which was like the Nehru Gandhian kind of framework India was in foreign policy. So I think this is why, for example, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa wanted to send a clear message to India, saying that he understands that. So that I think, so and in that context, he gave a clear message. He understands the security strategic sensitivities of India, and he would not undermine, or his regime would not do anything that would undermine that. So that is not just a policy, but I think that is a clear message to Prime Minister Modi that he understands where India comes from. So I
Yes,
think
because yes,
that's
he
a plus.
said it, in fact, yes, he said it in the remarks that he made after his meeting with Prime Minister Modi here in New Delhi. He said that we understand India's concerns on this issue in the Indian Ocean region. Now, let me ask you about the meeting that we had with Prime Minister Modi. They met for nearly an hour. It was a one-on-one meeting, after which they met for another half an hour. It was a restricted format meeting. Now, this is being seen as rather unusual. The two leaders speaking one-on-one for an hour. How would you see this? And also, how do you see the outcome of his visit? India has announced $400 million for Sri Lanka's infrastructure development, and also another $50 million for security. How do you see these two announcements?
I think, of course, we have to take this into in context. I think it's good that the two leaders met in confidence, and I think it allows, given their characteristics, given Prime Minister Modi's characteristics as well as President Rajapaksa's characteristics, I think they both are frank and open and quite articulate and very honest in their approach. Sometimes politically honesty and clarity sometimes is not helpful, but in one-on-ones, in one-to-ones, I think that is really helpful, because that then it really helps the two have an estimate of what they represent, what they stand for, and to be as clear as possible about what each other can do, how far they can go, and what compromises can be made, and what sensitivities that they would each have to respect. So I think in that context it's very important, because I think we are living at a time, we are at an age where India and Sri Lanka has to be significantly nuanced as well as honest at certain conjunctions. So the leaders, when they meet in such privacy, they have the ability to be very honest. Of course, they have to be nuanced to a certain extent outside. So I think that gives them a good, a good launching pad to move forward. And I think Prime Minister Modi, I think I expected some kind of a aid package or a credit line. So I think that's what India has given. So India is looking forward to working with this current president. So the opening up of a significant credit line, which is nearly similar to what the MCC offer with the US is for. US MCC is not a credit line; it's kind of outright grant. But of course, it comes with a lot of lot of complications and modalities of strings attached. But I think again, India is matching that even through a credit line. India, and the credit line is symbolic of India, showing that they are in for long-term collaboration and they have confidence in the new leadership. Because otherwise, you won't open a significant credit line. It could have been 100 million, not 400 million. You get my point. So 400 million is a lot of money still. So it shows India is showing a deeper long-term connectivity commitment to the current leadership. So in a way, it is a political kind of show of confidence
In the new leadership.
on the
Yes.
new leadership.
Is it also to do with the Chinese presence in Sri Lanka? India has been worried about that. And the Chinese have invested huge amounts of money in Sri Lanka on infrastructure. And of course, the Hambantota port has been a matter of great controversy. Of course, President Gotabaya has said that we'll take a relook at this. And so, how do you see this line of credit being extended in view of growing Chinese footprints in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, you can look at it in two ways, Parul. One is clearly, I think, in the back of Prime Minister Modi's head would have been the thing that Gotabaya Rajapaksa was very close to China. Not because he wanted to be close, but it was China who really bankrolled and provided the support for the war effort. So I'm sure President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has not the obligation, but he has the sincerity and he has the kind of goodwill towards China, because China was that kind of was a bulwark when especially in the last phase of the conflict. So I'm sure Prime Minister Modi knows this. But at the same time, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has clearly shown that he understands the reality of the current time, not the time when we were at war. He understands that China is a good friend, but also he understands that at certain points he has to say no, or he has to say, things that China might not like. So that's how I see the message of the revisit of the Hambantota port deal, where Gotabaya Rajapaksa was very clear. President Rajapaksa said, "Well, I don't personally like it." So I think he's not trying to make an enemy or have start an adversary relationship with China, but I think he's trying to, again, this pragmatism comes out. He's showing China, I have moved on, I have become more mature leader, I have to understand all the sensitivities of the region. So I think he will still have a good working relationship with China, but I don't think he will be it will be to the level he was when he was defense secretary, because he's now the president. So he doesn't have the luxury of taking a side or kind of going on with a one strategic project. So he is very much aware of the BRI. He's very much aware of the Chinese investment, and I think Sri Lanka, given our current status of economy, still needs significant development investment from the region, from as many as foreign investors. So in that context, we can never neglect China, because if you look at Sri Lanka's portion of investments, China is now the largest, since the last 10 years, the largest investor. So in Sri Lanka, yeah. I mean, if you look at so there is significant investment from China. So I don't think Sri Lankan president can afford to kind of let go of that. But my point, Arun, is from a Sri Lankan point of view, this is good for us. It is good because if the Sri Lankan president can maintain this kind of level of engagement with China and India, it also opens up the field for other countries to be more present in Sri Lanka, which also negates the adversarial dilemma India will face if only Sri Lanka is just banking on China. The more we kind of have this relationship with India and China, it will open up space for Indonesia, Australia, the US to come in. And the multiplicity of actors will actually help us to calm things down rather than have this, this bipart, this duality of, India, China. So I think that is the pragmatism. If you look at his manifesto, so he clearly says that. He says we have to engage with Russia. He identifies a number of countries. So I think he's trying to get there. I'm not trying to say it's going to be easy. In theory, foreign policy is always easy, but in practice, implementing foreign policy decisions and taking, because he has to recalibrate a lot of where we were heading. So these are all challenges. I'm not trying to say, I'm not. So it's always, as I tell people, it's wait and see. Time will tell.
Yes,
At
in
least the
fact,
approach is right. I feel the approach is right.
yes, in fact, this point that you made about President Gotabaya also looking at other countries was also made by him in an interview that he gave to SNI, his first interview after he took over as Sri Lankan president.
Yes.
And he said that I would like other countries to come in. I'd like Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia to invest. So, indeed, he said that other countries shouldn't be grumbling about the fact that, well, China is willing to invest if they are not themselves willing to put in their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, because the biggest challenge Sri Lanka faces, of course, there is a national security. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's electoral appeal was very much national security, but I think plus most people wanted more stability economically in this country. So I think his primary job as a president is to make sure he delivers on the development agenda, right? Parallelly providing the security architecture that will hold the country together, create the secure environment. Because I think that is why even this idea of Hambantota,
Mm-hmm.
I think emphasizes the idea of national security. Long-term leasing, those are not, if you look
Yes.
from a domestic perspective, those are all security challenges
Yes.
for Sri Lanka. So I think he's being a person who understands national security very well. I think he has that concern as well in his head. I don't know about. I never had a conversation with him or any of on these things, but these are things I can see very clearly that may be affecting him. But as I said, primarily it's the development, it's the economy, right? And for Sri Lanka to get out of the challenges we are in, the massive debt, we have. It's all about bringing investors in. There is no way we can generate that much of development if you don't get the investors coming in. So that's his priority. That's, I think, is the utmost priority he has to respond to, and his foreign policy should reflect and provide that space.
Dr. Vidanage, my final question to you, and this is to do with the issue of reconciliation.
Yeah.
And it was raised by the Indian External Affairs Minister, Dr. Shankar, when he went as the Prime Minister's special envoy to Colombo soon after President Gotabaya's election. And then again, it was mentioned by Prime Minister Modi in a statement after he had met President Gotabaya. So, where do you see this issue headed, especially because President Gotabaya's own, I think, victory in some ways, or rather his campaign was seen as deeply polarizing because the Sinhala majority voted for him, whereas the minorities did not.
Yeah. So I think that's domestically and of course internationally a fundamental challenge he has to face. Because let's come into reality terms. Sri Lanka, Gotabaya Rajapaksa was the first president who won purely from a Sinhala. I won't say Sinhala Buddhist, but Sinhala majority, but Buddhist, predominantly Buddhist. And of
Mhm.
course, there were Sinhala Catholics, Christians who really voted for him, and there were minorities who voted for him. So I think his challenge is to show, though he was voted from that bank, he has to set the tone clearly that he is a Sri Lankan president, not Sinhala president. So he actually, so it's a challenge he faces, and I think it's a challenge he should address, because otherwise he will be cornered by all parties who would like to take a hit at him using
Mm.
this particular narrow framing. So it's a monster he has to slay. Otherwise, the monster will consume him, because the monster of the image, not his monster, the image of that he is this singular only president. It's something it's one of those battles he has to fight by himself, because otherwise he would be, if he gives into the if he's convinced by the right wing, the extreme right, saying, it's fine, president, carry on like this, that would be very catastrophic for him in the future. But if he understands, I think he understands it, and slay the dragon himself, and it's a monster he has to defeat. It's his war. It's Gota's next war. Gota's first
Yes,
war would have been with Tamil
the
extremism.
LST.
His
Yes.
next war is actually with the extremists who probably might drag him down. So I think that's how we all should keenly watch how he deals with it.
Well,
I'm
he
sure
seems
he
to
has
have
to, and he will.
yes, he seems to have begun on the right note, because he did say that I know that the majority, Sinhala majority voted for me, and the others didn't. But as the president, I hope to carry everyone along with me and work for the welfare of all.
No, that's why I think we should focus on his development agenda, because I think he feels significantly the reconciliation process the last previous administration took was pretty much more on the levels of, of post kind of, they were all non-tangible, mostly non-tangible. You need more tangible stuff, which he was trying to say, yes, you need human rights, you need enforcing of all the psychosocial challenges, they're all fine. But if these people rebelled, these people took up arms because they were they were not just they were disempowered. So re-empowering the minority, especially the North and East Tamils, it comes in the form of providing them proper jobs, proper vacation, it's building their livelihoods basically. So if he can send the message as well as deliver on the policy of developing livelihoods, that's something you really desperately need in the north and east, I think. And he has that idea. His whole idea is that, we have to do, give them that opportunity. If you fail on that, irrespective of how much of, money you put on psychosocial development, whatever the more superficial stuff, if you don't fix the structural problems in those regions and take those people out of disempowerment, you never win the peace, or have reconciliation move forward. So I think
Yes.
that's, as I always say, I probably that is Gota's second war. And how do you fight that, and take Sri Lanka into that particular, the nation building, making Sri Lanka whole. That's my
Yeah,
question.
he has a lot to do ahead of him, and
Obvious.
I think yes, he'll be closely watched, because a lot of hopes have been pinned on him
Yes. Yes.
by Sri Lankans.
Yes.
And on that note, thank you so much, Dr. Vidanage, for talking to SNI, and I hope we continue with our conversations.
My pleasure, Parun. Thank you so much for having me again. Of course, we can continue this conversation, because there's so much to to see in the upcoming months.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you again.